evening. Thank you all for coming and venturing out in this very chilly weather. I assure you, you're going to have a fun evening, a festive evening with Matcha, and of course with our presenter, Candice Kumai. I met Candice Kumai a couple years ago, and we certainly sort of connected because we shared a similar background. She's half Japanese and Polish, and I'm half Japanese and Jewish. And of course, it's the Japanese side of me that's here tonight during Passover week. But we had a great respect for the culture and, of course, the traditions of Japan. And so we kept in touch over the years, and we're very excited because she just launched her book and, of course, has been very passionate about incorporating green tea in her recipes. And so tonight we wanted to do something fun that was a little out of the ordinary of the traditional Japanese tea ceremony. To give you a little background on Ibitoen, we are the largest green tea purveyor in the world. We were founded in Japan, and this year celebrates our 50th anniversary. So we have a long legacy of expertise in green tea and green tea beverages. We market everything from loose leaf teas all the way to having pioneered the first ready-to-drink green tea. How many people know oi ocha? Okay, well, it's the #1 selling green tea in Japan, and before we introduced the oi ocha, it was said that green tea could not even be bottled because green tea will oxidize. So it was with Itoen's expertise and with the technology, we were able to bottle the green tea, and we revolutionized tea drinking in Japan. But going back in history, there was matcha, and that's a revered, celebrated green tea. It was Japan first. It was the Buddhists who brought the tea seeds from China, and it was in like 1805, and they planted the tea seeds, and then they started drinking green tea. And I think it was in 1525 that actually the tea master Sen no Rikyu introduced the Japanese tea ceremony. And I don't know if you have experienced a tea ceremony, but it is quite a ritual, a lot of formality. It's just very inherent in the Japanese culture. I think everything from the tea ceremony to just the beauty, the appreciation for tranquility. So we're very excited to bring matcha a little bit more in the forefront. We have introduced this year a new line called Matcha Love, and you're wondering what's Matcha Love? Well, we wanted to bring matcha into a much more modern, a more approachable introduction of tea. We know that people are drinking green tea because one, it's delicious, one, that it has incredible health benefits, and we're seeing a lot of new applications of using matcha. And today with Candace, she's going to be incorporating a lot in her cuisine. I do want to also say that not only are we going to be watching her prepare, but we're also going to get to sample some of her dishes. And to whet your appetite, she's going to be making a matcha pistachio crusted halibut, a soba noodles with matcha dashi broth, and matcha tea cake, as well as matcha smoothie. So be sure to stay after the presentation. We'll also have an FAQ, so hopefully with Candace we'll be able to answer some of your questions that you may have. The beauty about matcha is that imagine the tea leaf that has been shade-grown for about 25 days, so it's looking for the sun. There's a lot of chlorophyll, and also it brings out a L-theanine, which is an amino acid which really brings out the sweetness, and also counters the natural, there's caffeine in tea, but because of the L-theanine, it really counters the caffeine effects, the edginess one gets when we drink, let's say, coffee. So L-theanine brings more of a calming, which is why the Zen monks used to drink matcha, so they could stay focused, alert, and calm. So with the matcha, we decided we wanted to kind of bring it into a much more fun, playful way. There's incredible health benefits. With the L-theanine, there's vitamin A, vitamin E, and catechins. We often hear about the EGCG. And every day there's new studies about the health benefits of green tea. And matcha, because when you have the tea leaf, imagine the tea leaf, it's been deveined. The stems, the veins have all been removed, so you have the full vitality of that tea leaf. And unlike, let's say, a loose leaf tea that has been steeped and brewed, where you may get 20% of the nutrients, with matcha, you ingest and consume the entire tea leaf. So that's the beauty about matcha. And a bowl of matcha traditionally is about 10 times the amount of antioxidants than a traditional cup of green tea. So we're seeing more and more people wanting to drink matcha. The traditional way of drinking matcha is with a chawan, which is a tea bowl, and this exquisite piece of work, the chasen. This is one piece of bamboo. I mean, to me, it's a beautiful objet in itself. But with the matcha powder, one pours the hot water. Water temperature is important. You can't have too much of a boiling water in there because it will bring out the bitterness. And then you whisk vigorously and make a frothy green tea. So later at the Itoen, there'll be a table, and we'll have Sakura demonstrate how to make a traditional cup of matcha. And the matcha love, we realize we're in the modern times. We're taking a modern take on an ancient ritual. We just launched actually a more easy, on-the-go, no-fuss matcha. We have an unsweetened green tea, which is brewed green tea in matcha, and also a sweetened version for those who like a little sweetness. So we hope, and you're all going to be taking home a little gift bag of our matcha love. We also have a tin of matcha for you. So we hope you'll go home and experiment with matcha yourself and some recipes. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Candice Kumai. Candice is currently a regular judge on Food Network's Iron Chef America, a contributing editor at Shape Magazine, and a monthly columnist at Men's Fitness Magazine. At 22, she received her professional culinary training at the Cordon Bleu School of Culinary Arts in California, and was the youngest chef to compete on Bravo's inaugural season of Top Chef at age 23. By the age of 30, she had written and developed recipes for more than half a dozen cookbooks, including the New York Times #1 bestseller, Cook Yourself Thin. Her own cookbooks include Pretty Delicious, Cook Yourself Sexy, and soon-to-be published Clean Green Drinks, which will be available on early release tonight during the reception, so be sure to get a signed copy. Candice also appears on numerous TV shows, including the Today Show, the CBS Early Show, The Talk, and the Marie Osmond Show, to name only just a few. And soon she's going to be on Queen Latifah, which I'm pretty excited about. Anyway, so I'm going to show a little clip that gives a little background about Candice. And so we hope you'll enjoy learning a little bit more about her background and her passion, and then she will be later demonstrating some of her recipes.
I called my mom when I was in Kyoto and I said, "Why is everything here so perfect?" And she said, "You know, Candice, don't forget, Japan is closed off to everyone for like hundreds of years." So I think that really made the difference when you kind of preserve things. So then I knew my job as a Japanese American was to preserve the culture and heritage of this wonderful country, its food, its people, its traditions. Hi, I'm Candice Kumai. I'm a food author, a food editor at several magazines. I work in television as a food personality. People remember me most still from good old Top Chef Season 1. And here we are almost 10 years later. Now I judge on Iron Chef America, and it's such an honor and a pleasure to be part of this really rapidly growing food industry. Most of my family is from around Oita, and Beppu is where my mother was born. My grandfather, Jun Korenaga, was from a family of farmers, and my grandmother's side, Fusako Kumai, they were a bunch of postmasters. And this was before the war started, so they really had some massively hard times back then. I think going back to study in Japan every year, I've grown more and more passionate about the culture and the heritage and kind of like the endurance that they went through and the struggle. And I think it really makes Japanese people who they are today. My grandfather was an impressionist artist all through Japan. You know, my mom said, we couldn't believe it. People would come to his gallery and pay. My grandmother was a wonderful stay-at-home mom who raised 4 girls through World War II, which was such a feat in itself. I see a lot of both my grandfather Jun and my grandmother Sako in me. And everybody always asks, if your dad's this tall Polish guy that looks like Jeff Bridges, where the heck did Kumai come from? Kumai is my middle name. Kuma actually means bear in Japanese, so we essentially are a very bear family. My grandpa passed on his art genes to many of us, including my aunt Kyoko Kumai, who has tapestry work and exhibits all over the world. There are only about 5 Japanese artists in the world who have permanent collections at the MoMA here in New York, and my aunt Kyoko Kumai is actually one of them. My parents met because my father was in the Navy. They were stationed in Yokosuka, you know, the sailors were going to take their day off and walk around for a little bit. And in Kamakura, there is a really big Buddha. It's a great tourist location. And all the guys are walking around, and then they saw my mom, who's got this beautiful long hair, and she's a gorgeous woman. And my dad said, hey, you know, do you want to show us around? And she said, oh, I thought it was a really good time to practice my English. So she said yes. And she hung out with a bunch of these sailors, and then my dad really took a liking to her, and he ended up asking her for her number later. And I think the funny story was he didn't know how far away Beppu was, so he took a cab there and ran out of money because it was so far. So my mom had to help him pay for their first meeting for his cab. So around 1975, my parents got married. They went to a shrine in southern Japan and did all the right things. And because my grandfather is an artist, he's very open-minded. At the time, it wasn't really normal to let your daughter, you know, run off with an American soldier. It felt right, and it was right for them at the time. And little do they know that they both have a huge impact on my, you know, outlook on food, my hard work and labor that I put into everything that I do. A lot of the cultural aspects, I think, that were shared with us were from my parents, who are very well-traveled, highly educated, and take everything in life, you know, as it is. And life is about celebrating other people and sharing who you are with each other. I'm so passionate about Japanese culture and cuisine. You know, I go there every year and study now, and I soak it all in. I climbed Mount Fuji last year, which Fuji-san was an experience, and I think everybody should climb a mountain in their lifetime. It will really put things into perspective for you. The most important things that I've learned from Japan and Japanese culture are to stay strong and stay focused, to always do your best work no matter what, and take integrity and pride in everything that you do. You can just tell by my face, I like light up when I get to talk about Japan, because it's such a precious place to me. This last trip to Japan was probably the hardest of all. My grandmother is now 93. My bachan is my everything. It was the first year where my mom said, you can finally go through your grandma's things. And of course, I went straight to her kitchen. I remembered visiting when I was a little kid, and I thought that kitchen was huge. And then when I go back now, I'm like, I can barely fit inside of here. Everything is so chisai, which means small. But I couldn't believe the amount of teacups and chasen and furoshiki and matcha brushes and all kinds of things were all over her house. So I started to pick these really cool teacups, and Clean Green Drinks, which is a new book I'm writing now, we started shooting with my grandmother's things. And it was the first book that I got to have my bachan be a part of.
Matcha here. These are actually my grandma's artifacts, my bachans, deer.
It's really nice to finally have something to share with the rest of the world. Matcha is a powdered version of green tea. Japanese tea ceremonies still are such an important part of Japanese culture that should be preserved. Matcha tea, as my mom said when she was a kid, was not super accessible. I mean, my grandmother would bring it home for the girls and just give it to them as a small treat. It was like kind of, you know, for the hierarchy there in Japan. So we're really lucky that we're in a time now where matcha is prominent across all boards. Matcha is a really inspiring Japanese ingredient, particularly because of its umami qualities. Umami is kind of like in between sweet and savory. And you'll notice I close my eyes when I say umami because it's such a magical component. I love my matcha just as is, which I highly recommend you try with your friends as kind of like a treat, maybe for lunch or over the weekend at a brunch. It will really help you to relax and stay in a really zen state. I personally love it in my smoothies. I love making a coconut matcha ice cream, which I've made with everyone from, you know, Julie Chen to Sharon Osbourne on the talk, and they loved it. And even all the magazines have been asking for, umami, Japanese sweet or savory recipes using matcha tea because it's becoming so popular. And then you can try a little bit of matcha powder in anything from soba noodles to, I like to crust my cod or snapper with a little touch or dust of matcha. Itoen has come to me and we've worked together on these great projects just to simply share the love of matcha. I highly encourage everybody to start trying a little piece of Japanese love, which is matcha tea.
Thank you guys so much for coming. This is going to be fun. Rona and I totally met at one of the Japan Week festivals a couple years ago, and we immediately hit it off because we're both from California. We're both Happas, which means we're half American, half Japanese. I'm very proud because we take that. We're both raised by a Japanese mother, which I think is really telling. And I've actually never shared any of this before with anyone. A big thank you to Nate and Raul if you're here. That was so awesome. Originally, they were like, my mom was like, you can't share private photos. Me and your father, we are like a private people. And also, she's like, I'm going to start charging you a PR fee, okay? Because she was so like, this isn't about us, this is about you. And I said, no, it is about you because you taught me everything I know and you made me who I am today. And I think Rona and I are both really proud of our Japanese heritage, and we've dedicated a big portion of our lives to give back to Japan, to make sure that we preserve the culture and the heritage and make sure that we do that right. And a big thank you to Itoen and Japan Society for both being huge proponents for celebrating Japanese culture because it is such a precious place. It also is virtually untouched, it seems now. And I get really angry when I'm there and I see McDonald's, no offense, but I'm like, yo, this is not cool. And I try to tell them that because they think it's the coolest place in the world. But I'm like, what's cool is what you guys originally have. So as Americans and Japanese Americans, I think it's great for us to preserve the culture and heritage. And I love that the food industry has really taken a loving, not a liking, but a love to Japanese food. They now have more Michelin stars than any other country, so we should be very proud of that. And you should also take a trip to Japan to visit these Michelin star restaurants. They're not very common. It's not because they produce great tires. It's because they simply produce great food and they take pride and quality and integrity in everything they do. I have never seen another culture work so intricate in detail besides the French. I'll give you some props. The Japanese are incredible in their artistry. So the video makes sense because now people can understand why I wouldn't consider myself just an author or a personality or a bobblehead, but yet an artist, because that is number one from my heritage and my upbringing. So we're here to cook today, so that's what I love to do best, in heels, of course. So what we're going to make is a matcha crusted halibut. So if you don't have halibut, you can definitely use cod or snapper or even a mahi-mahi. And so I've got some fresh fish back here that I'm going to portion up. And right before I cut up our fish, we're going to make a matcha dashi. Does anybody here know what dashi is? Anybody? Or do you know what dashi is? So you hear all the Iron Chefs that are like, and today on my panel, I decided to make a cranberry dashi. I'm like, oh, interesting. So dashi is just another word for stock, if you will. So here's how easy it is. Typical dashi is made from things like seaweed, kombu. So when you go to Sunrise Mart, you're going to look for Japanese kombu. It's not wakame, which is the kind of seaweed that you actually find in your miso soup. It's a little bit more firm. We'll just put that straight into your pan. Dashi is typically made of fish or kombu or seaweed, if you will. So that's just seaweed. We're going to add water to this. You can definitely start with cold water is best. So about 4 big stalks of kombu and then about 6 cups of water can go right over that. And I promise I'm going to try to stay in this corner. And I brought Neko Cat. Do you see him here, you guys? So I brought Neko Cat because he's the best, and he always comes on to set with us, along with this chia pet. Don't ask. All right, so the kombu is in here, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to let this simmer for a little while. You can also add katsuobushi, if anybody knows what this is. This is katsuobushi as a whole, which, as you can see, feels like a rock. This is one of the hardest foods in the world. It's actually dried and, like, I believe fermented bonito. So it's fish, but it feels like wood. Random, I know. It sounds so appetizing. But you can actually find this in Japan when you go to the markets. I picked this up in Tokyo at a big food mart because I was so wowed by the fact that this is thinly shaved bonito, which is actually just this big piece. It feels like wood. So you can definitely put this straight into here as well. What you do is you let this simmer for about 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on how strong you'd like your dashi. And then you can strain it, and then I'll have a swap out in a little bit to show you. And we're going to whisk in some matcha powder. Matcha powder is very easy and simple to cook with, except that it doesn't dissolve easily. So we're going to be using things like heat or a blender to break up that matcha so that you can get those flavors infused into your food. Because if you just throw it in there or like serve it, or say you were making an ice cream, which we're going to totally make today, it will not dissolve and infuse into these flavors and foods unless it is whipped up or used over heat. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our matcha crust while this is being made. Here are the simple ingredients for crust on top of your fish. You're going to get your food processor, or you could use a blender, and you're going to I'd say about 3/4 of a cup to a cup of raw pistachios. These are my bachans. We can't break them, Jade, wherever you are. This is matcha powder. So we're just going to add a little bit of that. It's a beautiful green color. So this whole dish is gorgeous and vibrant. We're going to add a little bit of sea salt to this too. So we're going to add that in. And this is our crust that we're making. So we're going to go ahead and pulse this a couple of times. Just enough to get a crust. If you do it too much, I always say you'll make guacamole, not in this case, but it will turn into a paste eventually. And you'll pretty much know when is when. So here's the color and consistency that you want. If you guys can see that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this on a pie plate. And this is our crust. And it's beautiful, and it's green, and I highly recommend you trying this on top of your fish next time you cook. It's delicious. Okay, so we've got our crust ready. Now we're going to portion out our halibut. So if you go to the store, look for fish that smells absolutely fresh, that looks gorgeous. I got some beautiful halibut at the store, and I'm just going to portion off probably about 4 servings today. And I'm going to start heating my pan already because I know I want to get a nice color on this. So I'm going to use an ingredient that's a little more, I love that they called this event a modern take on matcha or something like that, because I know the word modern means. So I'm allowed to do this stuff that's unconventional to Japanese cuisine. Coconut oil spray. So this stuff is awesome. It definitely adds another depth of flavor to your food. I love coconut oil in general. It's full of monounsaturated fat, which is good for you fat. So I'm not really afraid of it when I cook. I actually quite enjoy the health benefits. And if you buy it in the jar, it actually stays solidified. So you can take it and use it for things like removing your eye makeup or putting it on your arms and legs. I'm not crazy. I did it with Kathy Lee and Hoda, and they were like, wow, and started putting it everywhere. I'm like, we're going to eat that later. Yeah. So I keep a jar in my pantry, and I also keep a jar in my bathroom because it has wonderful benefits all around. I'm a huge proponent on staying natural. I'm very big on sticking to the way my bachan or my bapcha ate, and I want to make sure that we all kind of continue to preserve those things, because what you put into your body and what you put onto your face and what you eat is very important for it to stay, you know, natural in its natural state. So fish really quick. We're just going to portion about 4 of these out. I'm not going to do too much fish. I could go off about health and yada yada, and people think I'm crazy and they hide like things like Diet Coke from me. But I won't do that tonight at all, I promise. Okay, so 4 beautiful portions are here. Now, what you need to do when you're crusting fish, this is going to be really nice and hot, so I'll turn it down slightly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and use the spray right on the fish. And you can also certainly use Pam if you want, or whatever cooking spray you prefer. It's always an easy ingredient, and most chefs will use a little touch of this or that. It's just an easier way to sort of coat your fish. But I think because this meal is so light, the dashi is virtually calorie-free, what you want to do is you want to pair that with something that's got a bit of body and oomph to it, which in this case is going to be our fish. So you're just going to lay this into your pie plate, and you're going to get this beautiful green color on top. So I'm going to put that right into the pan. Okay. I hope you guys can see this. Now, there's salt already in this mixture, so you don't actually have to add salt to it. And then later, you can save some of this crust to put on in a bit. Now, matcha is very umami, which I love. I think that word is so sexy, by the way. It's a great descriptive word. And if you ever want to sound fancy in front of your friends, you could be like, this is so umami. But it's that in-between, sweet, savory. They call it the 5th sense or whatever it is. I don't know, the 5th taste bud, whatever you can call it. It's kind of a thing. In Japanese, I mean, that makes any sense at all. It's a thing that we've used in Japanese culture for a while. We just want to make sure when you're cooking that you've got a nice balance of flavors going on. So you always want some fat with something salty or sweet or acidic all together in one. I'll just get one more of this piece going. Just want to make sure we get a pretty plate up going for you guys, because these plates I brought from my bachan are pretty small. So you're lucky because there's a lot of great fish available in these markets out here. And in Japan, too, they've got amazing variety of fish. I also go to Hawaii quite frequently to cook with all my friends out there. And, you know, one thing that we have a plethora of is delicious seafood. So super grateful for that. And I always love respecting, you know, where we get our fish from as well, and making sure that we buy sustainable fish where we can. Okay, so these are going to go in your pan for just a little bit. They're also thick portions, so this may take a while to cook. So our dashi is still cooking down here, as you can see. And what you want to do is you want to just give it a stir every now and then. Keep your eye on it, I always say, but definitely leave it alone, because food really does what it wants. And I like to keep things really simple now. You know, I think when I was first on Top Chef, or when I was growing up or in culinary school, you wanted to be like fancy pants. But really with food, it's quite simple and beautiful if you leave it in its most natural state. So I prefer also light on the seasoning. So as you saw, this is about 3 ingredients altogether. We're going to save a little bit of this because we're going to crust it on here later. So I'm just going to reserve a little bit. I'm never afraid that it touched a little bit of fish, but I could assume that some people would. So be careful with that kind of stuff. If you're using poultry, don't reuse any of your crust. But in this case, I'm cool with just topping it on off at the end. Thanks, Lori. Okay, so we're going to change out boards. I think in just a bit we can swap them. So this is all going to cook down for just a bit, and we'll try to get some nice color on that fish so you can see. The next thing that we can do is we can start with our dessert, because these 2 things might take a little bit of time. So if you've got vegan friends, or say you just want to try something different, I played with a couple of different versions of ice cream for a new book, and this matcha coconut ice cream idea wouldn't leave me alone. So this is how simple it is to make homemade ice cream. And I think you're going to find this like mega wow factor. Thank you. Yeah, and the matcha is where? Okay, thank you. Where is it, Lori? Where? Oh. Just grab a little more, it'd be great. Thank you. All right, so these are simple ingredients that we're going to use for making an ice cream. So we've got coconut milk, almond milk, and regular organic sugar here. So these are very simple ingredients. If you look at the back label of ice cream, it might freak you out. So just make sure that you stick to things, again, that are natural. There's no need for these excess items other than, you know, preservatives and things for the most part, or what I think that they're adding. But just make sure that you keep an eye on what you're eating. Okay. So this is all we're going to do is we're going to dump the almond milk, which cuts a lot of the fat content. The coconut milk, which is amazing and comes in a can, just blend it on up. And we're going to add our sugar. There are proper portions on some recipe cards that you're going to get, so you will know exact measurements. This is matcha powder. So the reason why we're putting this in a blender, which seems a little odd, is because, again, I think a little bit of salt might be really cool to blend this up as well. The matcha powder is very stubborn, and it doesn't like to dissolve or break up unless you put it into a blender or overheat. That's your other option. So blend that up. Thank you. All right, and see how this dissolved? It's a beautiful green color now, and it's all melted and dissolved in there. And all you need to do is invest in a really nice quality ice cream maker at home. This is so going to be the new trend, is making all of your ice creams at home. And then you hit the button, and then you just pour this mix straight into your ice cream maker. Oh, might need to take the lid off. I love this stuff. Do you see how easy that was? It was 4 ingredients, and that was your mix to your perfect matcha green tea ice cream. We'll let that go for a little bit to see if we get some consistency on there. And if not, I have a swap out I'm going to show you. And I'm going to top it with really unconventional things that are modern, like dark chocolate, lavender, fresh mint, which goes really well with matcha, even rose petals from Mom's Garden, fresh berries, toasted coconut, and we have edible flowers today because Lori went to the market and found these. They're amazing. I really highly suggest trying new things and new ingredients. But this ice cream is like, excuse my modern language, off the chain. It's so good. Okay. So we're cooking this fish down. Now, the key with your dashi, we should keep an eye on this, is you're looking for that bright green color. So remember, you would take this, cook it down for 45 minutes typically, and then what we're going to do is we're going to add our matcha powder to it, and we're going to whisk it in. So we'll work on that next. While the fish is still cooking down, because it may take a little bit more time, I can also show you what to do with your leftover kombu, which is what you're cooking down with the seaweed when it cooks down. Some people toss this. Some people make it into fermented pickles. I like to actually add it to my noodles because we're going to be topping the fish over some soba, and then we're going to be ladling the matcha dashi over the soba noodles. All right, we'll let that cook a little bit longer. This guy doesn't want to stay up straight. Well, food does what it wants, so sometimes you just got to let the stubborn ones be. You know, an interesting concept that I was taught by my first amazing food editor, Pam Krause. When you're in this industry, there's a lot of competition. In any industry, there's a lot of competition. And her theory was when you're cooking a lot of elements, particularly proteins in a pan, one gets all shriveled up and icky on its own. But if you put them all together, they kind of keep all each other all moist and lovely and happy. So it was a great analogy for me to learn in my early years where I was very stubborn about not making it and why weren't things happening, and I was so frustrated with life. But it was a really good analogy to being a lover and supporting everyone. And I definitely noticed over the years that when I support my friends who are chefs in the industry or other TV hosts or other editors and food mag writers, and I mean, it's amazing the people that you meet and how cool they are, because you'll know who's in it to help each other and who's in it to like be out for themselves. And it's a really fun thing to sort of discover down the line. The more you give to each other, the more really does come back. So same goes for cooking. These little guys will keep each other moist along the way. So here's my matcha swap and my soba noodles. So your dashi is going to come out looking like this, which is a clear broth. It's got a green color to it. I just need matcha powder. And I'll also show you how to cut this kombu up in just a sec.
Powder is in there.
Right. I'd love some to show them. That would be rad. Thanks, Lori. Okay, so these guys are cooking down just in a bit and should be ready. It's great to serve this meal a la minute, which means as soon as it's done, to the minute. And our ice cream looks amazing. Okay, so just to show you how to cut your kombu when it's all done, you can go ahead and just grab your knife and reuse this. Remember, you could make it into pickles. You could add it to your, we're going to add it to our dish, but you can just give it a nice chop here. And I like to do like a little julienne of these ribbons here. So we're going to add this to our soba noodles, which we cooked up earlier. And I didn't want to demo that because that's like watching paint dry. So, like, should we cook the noodles on set? No. Not exciting. On Iron Chef, they're like, wow, look at those soba noodles cooking. Like, I don't think they've ever said that. Okay. So, can you imagine? That would be the end of all things. So I'm just going to take the kombu and toss it into my soba. And what I did was I actually glazed my soba with a little gomabura, which is a Japanese roasted sesame oil. And I wanted y'all to know that my mom taught me everything right that I know. She always said, you know, you have to study and give them the correct information all the time, Candice. You have to study before each show, especially for the Japanese. It's like, I know, I'm aware. So I take that to heart, and she's been the best sensei I've ever had. So grateful. She's actually a Japanese language teacher in San Diego. So learning how to be a teacher, I think, comes naturally from her. So the ice cream's still going. I apologize if that's loud. I'm going to go ahead and do a plate up because I don't want us to sit around and wait for this fish to dry, or excuse me, for the fish to cook up. So if I get some matcha powder, I don't know where it is. Okay, great. So what you do is you take the matcha and you take it and put it into your dashi, and you put this on a nice high heat, and you start whisking it in. And what's going to happen is it's going to dissolve into your kombu dashi, which is just made of kombu and bonito or katsuobushi. So we're going to do an interesting combination of things here. And yes, this is much more modern than you would normally see in a kaiseki gyori or something like that, which is like a small plates restaurant. They're found across Japan. I love visiting them when I go to Japan because you never know what you're going to get at those. So we're just going to plate a little bit of soba and the chopped up, I don't know where you guys can see this. And I'm going to remove this fish board while we do this. I'm going to take this guy out of here. Okay, go ahead and take this away. I'm going to put that in there, and then this whole thing can go. Let me remove another one of these. Thanks. Grazie. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to do a little plate up here. So we've got our noodles. Fish is cooking down. I'm just going to turn this off because you guys get the idea. You can also put these into an oven, which is actually what I would have preferred to do. But since we're on demo here and we can't have an easy bake oven on set, we had to show you guys in the pan. So I think it's best to crust this up and to grease a lightly baked or a light baking sheet with a little bit of coconut oil and place these fillets down and just pop it right into the oven. And then you can forget about it. What's that thing that man says? Set it and forget it. And then you just leave and you do your next thing, which would be the ice cream, preparing the noodles. swooning your friends with some sake or beer or ito-en green tea. Thank you. And then you can start working on all the other elements. So this whole recipe would be great prepared with like a seaweed salad. I'm also a big fan of miso or really anything that incorporates greens into your diet before a big meal. All right, so we've got beautiful soba ready to go. And then remember what you're gonna do is just take a little bit of your matcha. Now my whisk is over here, hang on. And then what you do is you just put it right in. You can also use a matcha sifter and make sure it's all sifted and then add it in. And it will only dissolve if it's warm. Quickly, that is. Okay? And it adds a beautiful element of flavor on that. Make sure to test your dashi. Taste it before you serve it. That's very important. Dashi can taste like nothing. It can taste like water. If you haven't simmered it long enough, you might need to add more kombu. You might need to add more bonito. It depends on what you're cooking, but it's really important for you to test that dashi. What I'm going to do now is just take a little bit of this, and I'm going to ladle it into the noodles. So we're going to get a hot broth in there. And all of you are going to get to taste this after, so it's very exciting to share these recipes with you guys. It's very light also. We don't have the ice cream to taste today. I actually have a matcha loaf cake recipe since there was a limited amount of freezer space here. So you're going to get to taste a smoothie as well as a loaf cake. Okay, so we have this all going on here. The next thing that you want to do is just take your fish and plate that on top. And it can move around a little bit too, so what I like to do is finish mine off with a little bit of another dust of pistachio matcha. Okay, you're too stubborn. Hang on. I know what I'm going to do. We just get a tiny bit of fish on top. And then I'm going to do a dust of matcha on top of these dishes as well. So we'll add a little more of the pistachio crust. I don't know if you guys can see this guy, but he's sitting on top of the noodles there. Just a tiny tasting menu is good for this kind of recipe. I don't think it's necessary to do large portions since it's more of an appetizer. And again, we'll also dust this guy off here. And you saw we made dashi. We also made noodles, fish. We're making an ice cream all kind of at the same time because I like my cooking to be semi-easy because I got a lot of people to entertain and a lot of work to do. So I don't like to overdo it half the time. We also have a sifter here. So the sifter, can be easily used to top this off. Okay, so we'll just get a little bit of matcha powder into the sifter. And I'll also use that on the ice cream too. But you want to do like a little dust on the very top there. And again, it has umami qualities to it, so it's absolutely delicious. Okay, and then for the ice cream, I'm going to switch boards so you guys can actually see both of these recipes going on. So we're going to do a little mini swap and clean up here. Okay, so these can stay out. This we're going to swap. Yeah, keep that out. Thank you. And a new rag if we can. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And then another board would be great. Do we have the other little wood board? Or is that the only one? Okay, just another, I'll plate this on this side. Okay, I'm going to shift this over then. Okay, so now I'm going to move the ice cream board over so you guys can see this. So that's all the toppings here. I think we can actually move this guy or unplug that whole situation. Super, thank you. All right, can everybody see this guy now? Ice cream is very important, I know. So this is your savory dish with matcha. My grandmother's ohashi. Everything that I do that's Japanese now, I always kind of have my mom or my bachan in my mind because they're totally different people too. They're very, very different. My mom's very serious and very like all about education, and my grandma's kind of like anything goes and, you know, live a full life. Don't worry about anything else. So I'm kind of an in-between both of those kind of person, I guess. I don't know. But it is really cute. And as you saw, my grandfather was this crazy, amazingly talented artist. I mean, he wasn't crazy. Sorry, Mom. He was crazy talented, which means he was incredibly talented in everything that he did, which really kind of translated to doing everything from your heart. So with cooking, as you guys know, if you cook from your heart, you can really feel it, see it, touch it, taste it. And I think for most of us that are in this industry, we're really in this industry because we love people. We don't necessarily love food. So I want to show you how this ice cream is coming out. So I'm going to see if I can pull this machine over. Is it possible, Lori? Okay. Otherwise, I can just take out the bucket. I think we're cool. Okay. So this is what it's going to look like when it starts to get done, if you guys can see. So I'll show you. And what happens is this ice cream maker is the bomb because it actually, you don't need to freeze this at all. It does it all in one, which is so cool. But I'm going to show you a swap out of this in just a bit. But as you can see, it's already starting to chill up. So luckily we have a swap here that I can show you. After 1 hour, thank you, ma'am, in this machine, or after like 20 minutes in another machine, they all kind of vary. You're going to get an ice cream that looks like this. And it comes out so beautiful. The other thing that you probably didn't know about this ice cream is it's non-dairy. It's made of coconut milk and almond milk, as you saw. So that's not really typical. And the scoops of this look amazing. So I'm going to do 1 scoop into each little tiny teacup. And these are Bachan's teacups. I brought them over to share with you because a little part of her is always with me. And what we're going to do is we're going to just do a dust of matcha over these so you can see how beautiful they look. Has anybody here had mochi ice cream? Because that's like the craziest, most popular thing. Every time we go to Trader Joe's, I'm from Cali, so forgive me if I talk about this a lot, but my girlfriends are always like, oh yeah, the mochi ice cream. And we totally have a perfect life and everything's easy. I love you guys, sorry, but that's what we have to schlep everything here in New York, everything. So yeah, mochi ice cream seems to be the least of my worries here. A dust on top will do. And then we're going to add some mint in one, so you can just keep this really fresh and lovely. Can y'all see that? Okay, sort of, kind of. Okay, and then lavender and mint are also beautiful together, so we'll keep that one really earthy and hippie-like. The next one I want to go to town, matcha and chocolate go together like 2 peas in a pod. I love this stuff. So a little bit of chocolate curls here. Now, how to achieve this, I even showed Jadester today. Get a blow dryer on a block of chocolate and just like let it get really hot, and then take your vegetable peeler and just run it off, and you'll get these amazing like chocolate curls. I know it's hard to see that. And then what we're going to do on the last one, we'll go ahead and make this one gorge with some rose petals and also some edible flowers. And the berries, you know, that can always go in there whenever. Say you're having a big party. I think it's great to use fresh ingredients always. And make sure that your guests, you know, try out everything unique and different and really share something, you know, new with them. Make this matcha ice cream. It's actually pretty darn easy, as you saw. It doesn't take much time or effort. And we'll add a little more lavender on that. And then when you're ready, oh, toasted coconut, I forgot. This is amazing. So this stuff, you just throw it in a pan, in a sheet tray, and then put it into the oven for like, I'd say 5 minutes, but really keep an eye on it because it will burn very quickly. We'll put that with the chocolate because that sounds delicious. But really, this stuff, oh my God, we need to Instagram this. It looks amazing. This is really awesome because, Itawen, thank you for letting me play with matcha for the last few months. I've had a ball. It's been so cool. And I think that you really helped me tap back into my Japanese heritage, which is so cool. Thanks. And we'll be out there with books and tasting and biru and anything else that you guys want will be out there. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Now, how many people actually enjoy cooking? Okay, this is great. And I have to tell, when we were thinking about doing an event and matcha, and we were thinking what would be a great way to introduce matcha, we thought, well, one, who doesn't enjoy eating? Not everybody enjoys cooking, but we thought this was a good way of, bringing a little bit of the passion and embracing green tea. So anyway, thank you, Miss.
Yes, cheers.
We are drinking our Tea's Tea, another Itoen product. We hope you enjoy Tea's Tea as well, but cheers.
This has got to be the most popular one, though.
Yes, and I have to say that, when we first brought the unsweetened green tea here to the United States, which is probably about 11 years ago, there was a lot of pushback. People were used to sweet. And today, I have to say, people are welcoming. I think people are understanding that they're really appreciating the pure taste of tea, the integrity of the tea leaf. And I have to say, with our 50-year history, we've got the expertise, and we hope you will continue to enjoy tea. But are there any questions that one may have in terms of matcha? And we have a question there. And we have a mic, actually. There we go, right there.
This is more of a technical question, and I've read a lot about matcha and I enjoy it. But the preparation in the bowl when you're serving it hot, and what's the significance of getting that foam? Is it really necessary, or does it add to?
No, it does. I mean, it really aerates. I mean, with the oxygen and there's a whole movement. It's usually sort of like an whisking. It's just an art. And I love, the tea master, Sendo Rikyu, said, oh, tea is just boiling water and making tea. But if you talk to people who are studying tea ceremony, it takes a lifetime. But yes, I mean, part of it is really almost aerating, but dissolving it. Mm-hmm. And that frothiness does really bring out the taste profile of the matcha.
Okay, and health benefits as well, maybe?
Well, of course. I mean, the green tea in itself has the health benefits, but, you want it dissolved and you're actually consuming the beverage. Right. And it does taste so good, and you want it very smooth on the palate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for that presentation. That was great. Can matcha be made from tea produced in other countries, or must it only be made with Japanese-grown tea?
Well, traditionally matcha is from Japan, and it's really interesting because, most countries have the tradition and culture of tea, but it's really only Japan that actually does the Japanese tea ceremony and has the stone ground milled tea. There is, years ago, yes, in China, but it's really only Japan who has this culture of the chanoyu, which means, or sado, or chado, which means the way of tea. But there are leaves I know that are used, from other countries, and it can be done, but the authenticity, the purity, and the quality, and the heart is in Japan.
I go there and I find off the beaten path restaurants on purpose because not to sound crazy, but I sit on the panel at Iron Chef and it's like I've been served by some of the best that are holier than thou. So the Michelin Guide is awesome and I appreciate it and I love it. But I find the most pleasure in going to the mom and pop stores that are down the street hidden, and I encourage people to find them too, because the guides are great. And as you know, who taught me about the Michelin Guide was Sam Sifton. I said, how the heck were tires associated with food? And, you know, and he says, well, I'll tell you why, because of maps. And the story is many years ago that maps were needed for travelers, you know, and going to foreign countries, and they wanted to know where to go. And then people became so curious about food, and they said, well, where do I go to eat in Paris? So they said, well, I guess we should create some, Michelin said, I guess we should create some maps and also point out where they should eat. And then this rating system came about, and then before we knew it, Japan had the most highest rated Michelin star restaurants in the world, predominantly in the location of Tokyo. So if you go there, any of those restaurants, you know, as you know, that means that they have to have the best quality. I mean, that means that these Michelin star, I believe what's the term for them? You know, they're like these secret agents, basically, that go into the restaurants.
They go undercover.
Yeah, and that basically means they hit every nodule, like, over and over. I would say I'm in love with Jiro and would love to go eat at his sushi bar, number one. But I think, you know, you're going to get quality going there. And they created that menu or that guide because it meant that that restaurant was worth going to for a whole trip to Japan would be worth just to visit that one restaurant. So specific to Tokyo, I would say go to a kaiseki gyori, which is like a traditional Japanese-style restaurant. Usually they don't break rules. Like we had a great discussion earlier about dashi and dashi powder. And I know that if you're a culinary geek in here, you know what that means. It's a powder that my mom uses. Everyone's mom. Your mom uses it, right?
Mm-hmm. She does. She does.
See? I mean, it's like a shortcut. But at a kaiseki gyori, Tomomi-san and I were talking, and she said, you know, they probably would never use the dashi powder. No outside sauces, no powders, nothing processed. Everything is real. But I guess I'll do research for you and see where I go next. I'm planning on going back this summer. But yeah, I think off the beaten path is so fun. And if you guys write down kaiseki ryori, it's like a little bit hard.
That's a definite must when you go to Japan.
Yes.
Yeah. And Candice probably doesn't know this, but I happen to be married to a French chef who trained in the Michelin restaurants in France. And it pained him to hear that there were more Michelin stars in Tokyo. Of course, I had to rub it in. Yeah. Any other questions that we may have on matcha? Yes?
Candice, you mentioned that you go to Japan every year to study. Is that formal study, or are you taking classes, or are you just traveling around and
That's interesting. I mean, obviously, it's this one country that makes me sort of feel at home, other than Hawaii is another place where I go and feel very at home, besides California. I think when you grow up with a Japanese mom who was born and raised Japanese, as you saw, and came here in her late 20s, maybe mid-20s, my influence was so strong and unbroken from her because, as the Japanese know, you are so proud of your heritage. I mean, she was like, no, we are only going to have a Japanese only. We are the number one. You know, like everything had to be right. And because of her, I'm an ultimate perfectionist in my craft, very hard on myself. And I think it's my right to go and discover this country before it changes too much, number one, because I like to go off the beaten path. I do go alone for a little bit, for an extended period of time. But I also go to see my family because everyone on my mother's side of the family is still there except for her, which is quite unique. And it's informal, but who knows, that could change one day. I think because my mother was a teacher, my Aunt Kyoko, the one that you saw that has the collections at the MoMA, is also a professor of tapestry in Japan at a university. And my grandfather was also on the side. You know, you can't make a living as an impressionist painter unless you're Picasso after you're dead. So he was a school teacher also. So I think it's in my genes to speak and discuss our heritage. So it's interesting. It could be something in my near future to study. But I have a hard time sitting down and paying attention, I'll say that.
But we grew up eating a lot of Japanese food.
Yeah.
And of course, I you know, just even in terms of ramen, growing up, visiting family in Japan, spending time in Japan, and here we are, ramen boom in New York City.
I
think
know,
there's like
it's
45 ramen
crazy.
stores. So it is really amazing how, you know, things that, and I think that's something that we had actually shared when we had met, is just how sort of it kind of osmosisly sort of, you know, influenced us. You know, it's interesting, and quite honestly, had somebody asked me 30 years ago if Japanese, like sushi, would be as popular as it is today, and having grown up there and having been a big cultural, I would have said absolutely not.
Yeah.
Americans are not going to eat raw fish, seaweed, sea urchin, eel, and here we are today. So, you know, palates change, introduction, and of course I think, you know, what was exciting for me to have Candace here was sort of representing the East and the West and merging the old and the new.
Yeah.
You know, we see the California roll. Had to throw that in.
Yeah.
But, you know, just how, you know, boundaries have crossed, and the ingredients. I really feel that matcha is such a great ingredient to have in your pantry. You know, years ago, I had done an event at the Smithsonian, and Kikkoman, together with Kikkoman, was celebrating their 50th anniversary. And I remember the president saying, you know, can you imagine 50 years ago coming here with a black water fermented soybeans, marketing here? Well, today, everyone's got their Heinz ketchup, they got their Kikkoman soy sauce, and of course we're seeing this with the green tea. You know, our tea's tea all the way to the matcha, and we're very excited about this matcha love because we really feel that it's, you know, we want people to embrace, to feel the love, and it has such a long history, obviously, that is so celebrated in Japan. And, you know, I know in Japan with tea ceremony, a lot of the young people had forgotten. You know, they wanted to sort of, you saw the picture here, the formality of sitting Japanese style. I don't know if you've sat Japanese style, but your legs get numb and you can't move. But they wanted to bring tea ceremony into a much more casual way. So they're actually doing tea ceremony now, you know, at a table. So it's more about the hospitality and sharing and talking, you know, and celebrating the long history that Japanese have, and incorporating it into the savory and sweet dishes as we saw tonight.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
I just had a quick question on matcha lattes, because you're seeing that everywhere now. Starbucks is serving it, and most of them use the powdered, already sweetened matcha. I was wondering what your take is using that versus just making matcha straight and then adding milk to it.
Yeah.
I find that the Starbucks version is a little too sweet for me. Mm-hmm. If you have any good recipes, if you could share with us, that'd be great.
Well, I have to say, when we first came here and introduced our unsweetened teas or ready-to-drinks, and we had a lot of comments say, oh, we drink green tea all the time. And we said, oh, what do you drink? And of course, we heard some of the brands they were drinking, which actually really had no green tea in it. And, you know, this is actually with the brewed. So it's really bringing awareness. And, you know, we are happy that a Starbucks is bringing tea out into the forefront. But I think, you know, as the palates get a little bit more, there's more awareness and the sophistication. We're seeing that from the time that we came. You know, people are really understand what green tea tastes like. They're getting much more selective. You know, they're understanding it's just not green tea, but it's the range. You know, the various senchas and the gyokuros, matcha, for example. So, you know, with that kind of latte, hopefully, you know, that is sort of maybe more of an Itoen role to introduce. But it's bringing awareness out, which is a positive. But hopefully, and we're seeing a lot of those beverages, like, believe me, we watch our competitors, and we're seeing that the market is definitely shifting more to a pure and authentic taste. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
We should also commend Itoen for sticking to their guns on cultural ways of brewing, preserving, and keeping the sugar out of drinks. As a health journalist on this other crazy spectrum of work I focus on, it is sweet drinks that have destroyed America's health, and it is a serious problem. You could drink 4 big cans of soda and already have well over the amount of sugar that you're supposed to have in one day, and I watch people chug this stuff all day. So really, in turn, you purchasing unsweetened drinks or brewing your own coffee and tea or making your own latte instead of going there, I mean, no offense to anybody, do what you want, but maybe it is better to stick at home and do things on your own. I always make my own coffee every morning, and I make my own blend because I enjoy it. And I think America's health is in serious jeopardy because we have such a palate for sugar. It's crazy. when I was a kid, my mom drank tea every morning, still does. No sugar ever. And it wasn't until way later when I dated a gentleman who put honey in his green tea all the time, and I found it a little weird because it is the umami essence of the tea that you want to captivate when you're drinking it. Tea is as prominent as wine over in Japan and in Asian countries and even over in the UK. For some reason, it's not as popular here. So all of you sitting here tonight, like I urge you to try the teas if you can. Try the matcha. When you go home, you're so lucky because you can take that powder, whisk it up, and taste that umami essence, along with a creaminess of matcha, which is very unique.
So you can send in your recipes to us.
Yeah, it's great to have
but
the
no,
suggestion.
it's very true. And, you know, again, a lot of the beverages, the lattes that you're taking are very much actual desserts. You know, they're not really sort of enjoying the green tea.
Yeah, I agree. It is totally a dessert.
Yeah, and I was, actually in November, there was a tea festival in Shizuoka, Japan, and I was part of the event, and I gave a little presentation. They really wanted to know about the Americans and how they were embracing green tea and just the culture in general. And it was very interesting because, of course, I had to also talk about the fact that United States, we have an obesity problem. Sodas, of course, we remember Mayor Bloomberg brought a lot of attention to the sodas. When Clinton banned the sodas in the schools, that was a huge, monumental move, and I think it brought a lot of awareness. And I had a lot of visual pictures, and when there were images of like what a soda would have and the amount of sugar cubes, and the Japanese were amazed, and the percentage of obesity. So it is interesting, and we're pleased because I do feel that, you know, the green tea, I mean, it really is such a delicious, with such deep various flavors and the umami quality that you talked about. And so, you know, enjoying it on its own is really, and you were talking about food, the purity of food and the purity of a product is so important. Yes?
So I know during the demo, Candace showed the different methods of mixing in matcha, so by heating or blending. And is there a method that's preferred or has, like, retains more nutrients instead of changing the state when you heat it?
Good question. Well, I mean, matcha powder is the purest form of tea that you can find. With the blending, I'm assuming that a lot of the nutrients are kept because you're not going to get the heat. And we all know that by nature, once you hit heat onto anything, you're going to deplete its amount of nutrients immediately. But I'm assuming that you don't, you still get a lot of health benefits from like a hot cup of matcha.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And again, you're getting that full potency of that leaf.
Right, and don't forget I'm blending it with like coconut milk and sugar and for the green drinks, and you're going to try one after this, it's made with banana, almond milk, matcha powder, and a little bit of ice and things like that. And really, we are huge proponents on getting food in its natural state in its highest amount of nutrients as possible. And we don't even do that as like a sales gimmick or anything. We're just doing it because that's how we were raised to eat. And to your question earlier about why do I go to Japan and study, there is an inclination in my soul and gut that tells me that I need to write a Japanese-American cookbook that sort of goes back and forth one day. I'm not ready to write it yet, just like I'm not ready to settle down and get married. But I am, when it's time, I'll know. Yeah, I'm preparing for that service.
Yes.
So when you bake with matcha,
Oh, Mike, we have a mic for you. Sorry about that.
just the end. Oh, okay. When you bake with matcha, I've tried to bake with matcha, and I've just added in a little bit with the dry ingredients. And I often have a texture problem because I haven't developed the recipe to include matcha. I've just added some matcha to a plain cake or something. So I was just thinking as we were talking, do you dissolve the matcha in the liquid
Into
ingredients
the wet,
first?
yeah, I was just going to say that.
That's probably what I've been doing wrong. Okay.
So wet ingredients, whisk,
Whisk
whisk profusely until all dissolved.
Until it looks like a smoothie.
Yeah, if you need to, you could add a slight bit of warmth to the wet ingredients as long as you don't like cook the eggs or anything to help it dissolve faster. But I think that's the key. You're going to taste a Japanese matcha loaf cake after this, and you basically have to melt that matcha powder into the ingredients. Yeah, that's the trick. That's why matcha goes so well as a beverage, though.
And one of my little favorites is a matcha vinaigrette. So
ooh, we haven't
try
done that
yeah,
yet.
Let's try that. But I know we actually have some little samplings for everybody. So again, Candace and I'll be out outside, and we have our table with matcha demonstration from Itoen. And Candace also has her new book, so she can get a signed. They make great gifts.
Yeah, and the book is not out until next Tuesday. So
oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll see you guys.
Thank you all. We appreciate you coming.